Good morning, everyone. The time is 10 o'clock in the morning on March 2nd, 2016. We're in room 120 of the John A. Wilson Building. I'm David Grosso, the chairman of the Committee on Education, and I'm calling to order the fiscal year 2015 Performance Oversight hearing for the State Board of Education and the Deputy Mayor for Education. The first agency to testify today will be the State Board of Education. The State Board advises the State Superintendent of Education on educational matters, including state standards, state policies, including those governing special, academic, vocational, charter, and other schools, state objectives, and state regulations proposed by the Mayor or the State Superintendent of Education. The State Board also approves a number of state-level policies involving truancy and absenteeism, high school graduation requirements, parental involvement, residency verification, and state accountability standards, among many others. The second agency to testify will be the Deputy Mayor for Education. The Deputy Mayor is responsible for developing and implementing the Mayor's vision for academic agenda and is responsible for creating a high-quality education continuum from early childhood through K-12 and on to a child's post-secondary and workforce successes. The three major responsibilities of the Deputy Mayor is to oversee a district-wide education strategy, manage interagency and cross-sector education coordination, and provide oversight and support for the D.C. Public Libraries, D.C. Public Schools, the Office of the State Superintendent for Education, the Public Charter School Board, the University of the District of Columbia, and newly this year, the Department of Parks and Recreation. Performance oversight hearings are an opportunity for the Council and the public to hear about the successes, challenges, and performance of our government agencies. These hearings help inform the work we have put into the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. The committee sent the State Board and the Deputy Mayor for Education a number of questions before this hearing to help us prepare. Those responses are all available online, both on my website and the Council website, and most of my questions today will be follow-up to those questions and answers. So I look forward to hearing the testimony of our government and public witnesses and also engaging in a meaningful conversation. So with that, I'm going to call up the first panel of witnesses and we'll get this hearing started. Not party. The first panel, I see we had 4 chairs, but now it's back down to 3. But that's okay. Someday we're going to get a longer table in here, and we're going to be able to put 4 chairs in there, because it doesn't make any sense that we can't put 4 chairs here, but we could put 4 chairs in other hearing rooms, and so it just makes it go one less person faster. But anyway, we're going to move forward. Gibran Tong, 12th grade student, School Without Walls, peer advocate, Young Women's Project. Nadia Gold-Moritz, executive director of the Young Women's Project. And Connie Spinner, head of school, Community College Prep. Gibran, do you want to start? Just turn your mic on and go for it.
Hello, my name is Gibran Tong. I am 17 years old and I currently attend School Without Walls Senior High School. I also live in Ward 8 of Washington, D.C., and I am peer advocate at the Young Women's Project. I am here to support the work of the State Board of Education and to commend them for including youth in their efforts to revise the health education standards. Peer educators at the Young Women's Project have worked with the State Board of Education for 2 years during the development of the health education standards and continue to work with them on other projects, such as graduation requirements. The State Board of Education has welcomed us to the table and has asked us for our input. They have encouraged you to testify about the health education standards during the State Board of Education monthly meetings, and previously met with Young Women's Project youth to talk about our ideas on the health standards and has asked us to host a health standards review session for other youth, which will happen later on this month. Under the leadership of the new Executive Director, John Paul, the State Board of Education has also started its own Student Advisory Committee this year, which is involved in many education issues. The State Board of Education is committed to addressing youth problems. When the Youth Working Group came up with a list of priority issues for the health education standards, State Board of Education President Jack Jacobson supported us on every issue we came up with, especially the mental health issues. He supported our full participation into the work and decision-making of the Health Working Group. I testified during the January meeting about my mental health issues and the importance of including mental health in our health education. During this meeting, President Jacobson was candid with us with his personal issues growing up as a teen, and has helped us know that he is invested in our well-being and understands why health education is so important to us. Thanks to the State Board of Education, I felt like my voice was heard and that I got the chance to express something that is very important to me, something that many teens don't get the opportunity to talk about. So thank you. The State Board of Education has also made sure that the health education standards move through the process. They have been diligent, engaging all the people who need to be at the table, and they have worked with Assistant Superintendent Donna Anthony to make sure that she is up to speed on everything and can effectively work with OSSI to move these standards along their processes. As a DC teen who has dealt with depression, it's important for teens like me to have a say in how my school addresses mental health issues in health class. Many of my peers have dealt with other health issues and experienced many different types of health education, so it's key to involve all of us in the process. Thank you again for listening to my testimony.
Thank you. Very good. Ms. Goldmaritz.
Good morning, Chairman Grasso and staff members. I'm Nadia Goldmaritz, the Executive Director of the Young Women's Project, which builds the leadership and power of DC youth so that they can expand opportunities and rights. YWP covers a broad range of programs, including education, condom distribution, as well as policy projects. During the last 2 years, as Jabron said, we've worked very closely with the State Board of Education on the health education standards, which you've heard enough testimonies on, so I'm not going to go into detail. But I did want to talk a little bit about our partnership with the board and why their role in the DC education system is so critical. We're especially grateful to State Board President Jack Jacobson and Executive Director John Paul Hayworth for their commitment to engaging youth leaders. As you know, education systems cannot improve without the meaningful input of youth, and there are, in our opinion, way too few opportunities for them to be involved in a meaningful way. The school board is one of the places that welcomes their participation with open arms. The State Board, there are 3 things that I want to mention about the State Board. One is their commitment to really engaging youth at a deep policy level. They have opportunities for youth on the State Board itself, through the advisory committee, as expert witnesses on their panels, and through working groups, which is what we did. I think it takes an enormous amount of time and energy to train youth, engage youth, create the opportunities for youth, and work with adults so that they're able to be partners with youth. And we just want to really commend the board for investing this time and energy. Another issue that's really important is just their open accessibility to the public. Who else has monthly meetings that are open to the public? They keep their working sessions open, and so for any young person or parent or member of the community who really wants to be engaged in the public education process, I think the school board really keeps an open door. The other one thing I want to acknowledge is just their willingness to try bold strategies to confront educational problems. This was the case with the health standards. I think every agency looks at an issue through their own lens. So when OSSI sees the health standards, they see testing and teacher training. When DCPS looks at the health standards, they see full-time equivalents and curricula. When the school board looks at the health standards, they see youth needs and solving youth problems. And they've really stuck with this perspective and stuck with the project, and I think have created, with many community partners, a product that we're all going to be very proud of. So thank you to the State Board, and thanks for hearing my testimony.
Thank you very much. Ms. Spinner, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Grasso.
Well, make sure you turn your microphone on.
That would be helpful.
Oops.
Got it. Good morning, Chairman Grasso. My name is Connie Spinner, and I serve as CEO and head of school at the Community College Preparatory Academy Public Charter School, an adult public charter school that provides education and skill development that empowers and prepares undercredited adults for post-secondary education, viable employment, and lifelong learning. We opened our doors in 2013 as the first adult charter school east of the river in Ward 8. Over the past 2 years, we've continued to learn about what it takes to serve our community, and we are adjusting both our programs and our processes to reflect the evolving needs of our customer base. Last year, the new high school equivalency examination was enacted. This new computer-based assessment is grounded in the Common Core curriculum and requires a whole new set of skills and critical thinking capabilities. Over the past year, we've struggled to adjust curriculum and staff to respond to the demands of the new high school equivalency exam. And we've worked with the staff and members of the state board to address the need for and the implications of a state diploma for successful GED completers. The state board has researched the issue, and they've struggled to respond to this unique workforce need in the District of Columbia. As you already know so well, Washington, D.C. is a knowledge-based economy whose tools of the trade are cognitive. The capacity to analyze, synthesize, reorder, research, and use the internet as a learning tool are all essential. Our high school graduates have to be able to compete with graduates of some of the most prestigious universities in this country for entry-level jobs. Their diploma has to indicate that they have evidenced competence in reasoning and computer basics, as well as Microsoft Office Suite. Our state board has grappled with these challenging issues and found a way to give meaning to the new test and its complexity through a proposed state diploma that will also reflect a new kind of rigor and mastery. As a resident of our city and as an educator, I'm proud to acknowledge that their thoughtful and rigorous dialogue and their continuing efforts in conjunction with Dr. Antoinette Mitchell and the Post-Secondary Office of the State Superintendent have been profound. As an adult educator who grapples with the complexities of preparing our residents for the new test and the kind of advanced certifications required to make them marketable in our economy, I'm pleased to work with the State Board and acknowledge their efforts.
Thank you. Well, thank you all very much for coming down and heaping praise on the State Board of Education this morning. I think it's important that we recognize publicly the progress that's been made by the State Board this year, both in their work with the public, but also on some substantive policy issues that are important, like the state diploma and the health, the health standards. So I'm just glad that you guys came down and did this today. I don't have any follow-up questions right now, but we'll hear from the State Board shortly and go from there. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is Sarah Livingston here? I know she's not over there. There's nobody over there. So she's not over here either. So we're going to go right to the government witnesses. If we can get Jack Jacobson, the president of the D.C. State Board of Education, Joanna Smith, the ombudsman for public education, and Faith Gibson Hubbard, the chief student advocate, to all come up. Good morning. Who's going first? Jack? All right. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Grosso and members of the Committee on Education. My name is Jack Jacobson, and I have the honor to serve as the President and Ward 2 member of the D.C. State Board of Education. I am joined today by Joanna Smith, Ombudsman for Public Education, and Faith Gibson Hubbard, our Chief Student Advocate. John Paul Hayworth, our Executive Director, may join us for the question and answer for administrative issues. We are pleased to be here today to highlight the important work of the State Board of Education over the past year. In the interest of time, I will be delivering a modified version of our written testimony that was provided for the record. As education policy leaders responsible for establishing the rules that affect all students, from academic standards to the state accountability system, the State Board's 9 elected members and two student representatives, Brian Contreras from School Without Walls and Destiny Whittington from Richard C. Wright Public Charter School, provide a crucial independent voice for all District of Columbia residents. We focus solely on education-related matters, and the policies we approve reflect deep, meaningful community engagement and the views and needs of all district residents. I want to acknowledge the panel previously and thank them so much for coming down here tonight and sharing their thoughts on the State Board's work this year. The State Board took several steps this year towards its commitment to increasing public engagement and transparency. As the previous witnesses testified, this year we established a student advisory committee led by our student representatives that have members from both DC public charter schools and DC public schools from around the city across the wards. They've also partnered with the new student advisory committee of the public charter school board and held a joint hearing together, which was incredibly informative. We recently updated our website to be more user-friendly and have been broadcasting our working sessions and public meetings live via Twitter so that people can tune in from home as we discuss important topics. We're also working closely with the Office of Cable Television to get information out on the District Knowledge Network about the State Board and its activities. The State Board is also making efforts to provide information in languages other than English. While the State Board has not been able to totally fulfill this mandate, we have ensured that our staff members have access to translation and interpretation services and have worked to translate priority portions of our website. Unfortunately, the State Board is not capable of full compliance with the Act without additional resources. However, we are doing our best to partner with other agencies and organizations so that no one is turned away from the Board of Education due to language barriers. The Board strived to ensure that the district's flexibility waiver from many of the punitive measures of No Child Left Behind continued to be in effect this school year. With the passage of the Every Student Succeeds Act in December, the Board has been working with its local and national partners to determine the scope of changes required, particularly with the National Association of State Boards of Education, which played a key role in shaping the new law during our at-large colleague, Mary Lord's, presidency of the organization. One of the most obvious changes that will be required in the legislative action is the removal of the words "No Child Left Behind" from the Board's enabling statute. We look forward to working with the committee and with you, Mr. Chairman, on language for the Budget Support Act on that. In April 2015, this Board adopted a report drafted by our Truancy and Student Engagement Committee, chaired by our Ward 4 colleague, Camille Anderson. This report illustrated the challenges that have accompanied implementation of the district's new compulsory attendance laws, particularly the so-called 80-20 rule, that classified students who missed 20% of the school day as truant and proposed recommendations for improvement. Since then, the Board has actively participated on the Deputy Mayor's Truancy Task Force, which is investigating solutions to many of the issues the Board has identified. The Board continued substantial research and outreach into granting a state diploma for individuals who pass the GED exam or who successfully complete the National External Diploma Program, or NEDP. The Board passed a resolution in November advising OSSE to create resolutions for such a credential. We are very proud to report that in January, the Board gave final approval to the state diploma. OSSE is now working to notify eligible residents of this change, and we believe this will have a significant assistance to our adult and non-traditional learners. In August 2015, under the leadership of our Ward 1 colleague, Ms. Laura Wilson-Phelan, the Board launched the High School Credit Flexibility Task Force to investigate options for allowing high school students to earn credit outside of the normal Carnegie unit. The Board adopted the task force's report and recommendations at its December 2015 public meeting and advised OSSE to follow the task force's recommendations. Draft regulations were published for public comment on January 22nd, and we are working with OSSE to incorporate those comments into a final draft for action. In 2015, the Board continued to lead the review of the district's health education standards, which were first improved in 2008 as part of the district's effort to combat high rates of child obesity, teen pregnancy, and HIV and AIDS. The Board and OSSE worked together to develop a transparent process for additional review, adoption, and implementation of a new set of standards, ensuring that educators and the community will continue to provide input on this important issue. The Board anticipates voting on final standards in the next few months in time for implementation for the 2016-2017 school year. 2015 also provided ample opportunity to re-examine the district's staggering gaps in achievement and opportunity between poor and minority students and their higher achieving peers. The PARA report that you're very familiar with brought many of these issues to the forefront once again. Additionally, the results from the first year of PARC, the district's new Common Core aligned assessment, show low achievement and troubling gaps among many traditionally underperforming groups. In math, for instance, 68% of white students performed at grade level, while only 16% of black students did. In English language arts, the difference is even starker, 79% for white students and 17% for black students. The National Assessment for Educational Progress, or NAEP, showed that while overall scores for district students rose over the past decade, poor and minority students have not made significant gains. There are also striking disparities for our English language learner population and our special education students. The board's investigation into these achievement and opportunity gaps continues, led by our Ward 8 colleague, Tiara Jolly, and we anticipate presenting all of that information in the fall. Mr. Chairman, the board has accomplished all of these initiatives and more with an insufficient budget. I'm proud to say that the board is working more closely with its government agency partners than at any other time during my tenure in office. The board is eager to do its part to increase the pace of education reform, but without adequate resources, that is impossible. We cannot move deliberately, thoughtfully, and come to well-reasoned policy positions that are based on evidence without sufficient support. We are well aware that budget is not the subject of this hearing. However, I would be negligent if I did not call the committee's attention to the fiscal issues faced by the board, the ombudsman, and the student advocate. Mr. Chairman and other members of the Education Committee, the Board of Education is pleased to be here today to talk about what we accomplished in 2015. We frankly have a lot to be proud of. More importantly, I'm proud to have been a part of a state board that is active and dedicated to making a difference in the lives of the district students. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Smith, turn on your mic.
That's right. Good morning, Chairman Grasso. My name is Joyanna Smith, and I am the Ombudsman for Public Education. The Office of the Ombudsman for Public Education is responsible for helping students and parents who have questions, concerns, or complaints regarding the District of Columbia public schools and public charter schools. The office offers conflict resolution services and is committed to resolving complaints quickly and efficiently in all areas that affect student learning. We always like to highlight our work as we are often asked about the role of the Ombudsman. It is important to us that parents, students, and families, as well as stakeholders, understand our work and the services we offer. The goals for the office include: 1, responding to concerns in a timely, caring, and productive manner, as well as contributing creative policy solutions by identifying and sharing trends, and reducing the need for litigation by facilitating appropriate and timely resolution of education-related conflicts. Since our office's establishment 2 years ago, we have received approximately 903 cases overall. This school year, we have received 285 cases to date, which represents more than a 10% increase in our caseload as compared with last year's total of 255 cases by the end of February. We would have had even more cases at this point in the school year, in fact, but for our limited staff capacity in December and January. After our fall fellows transitioned from the office in mid-December of 2015, we did not have spring fellows available until early February. As a result, we had to limit the number of cases that we could accept and unfortunately had to turn some families away. We provided coaching when possible to these families and referred appropriate cases to other DC government entities, such as the Office of Human Rights, the Citywide Bullying Prevention Program, and to community-based organizations. While we receive cases from all wards of the city, the majority of our cases so far this school year have come from wards 8, 7, and 5. So about 25% from Ward 8, 19% from Ward 7, and about 10% from Ward 5. In total, about 54% of our cases come from those 3 wards. This trend has been consistent over the past 2 years. We continue to receive most, about 64% of our cases, from DCPS schools, and 27% of our cases come from public charter schools. The remaining percentages come from non-public schools at about 2% and other schools, such as daycare programs and private schools. The most common complaint areas are special education around 13%, school discipline issues around 10%, enrollment at around 12%, and bullying at 7%. I would like to highlight some of our recent work for you, which further demonstrates the ongoing need for our office and our services. Daniela, and I should note that we've changed these names to protect the privacy of our families and students, is a high school student who only speaks Spanish. Her school only provides an ELL teacher once a week. Currently, Daniela refuses to attend school because she is afraid to be in an English-speaking environment after traumatic experiences at her prior school. Her parents suspect that she might have a disability, as she is having a much harder time learning English than her older sibling. Her parents feel that the school dismisses their concerns and threatens them when they ask for help. Our office was able to help her family, requesting visiting instruction from an ELL teacher. Daniela should receive that instruction until her special education evaluations are completed, and she can be placed in an appropriate classroom to meet all of her needs. Jalea is an elementary school student who is generally doing well. However, another student in her classroom often hits her, and it escalates, or has escalated, to the point where she was scared to go to school. Her mother called us asking for the other student to be moved to a different classroom. After consulting with the school, we found it was not possible to move the other student because of that student's particular needs. We instead worked with a parent and the school to brainstorm best ways to help Jalea in moving to a different classroom herself. At our suggestion, the school had an in-person meeting with Jalea's mother to give her the chance to share all of her concerns. Ultimately, the parent and school developed a plan to make Jalea feel welcomed in her new classroom. Welcome. Damon, just one final example, is a high school student nearing graduation. His family received a phone call from his school saying he was being expelled, but they did not receive any paperwork about the proposed expulsion. The principal suggested he transfer to an alternative program. When our office inquired further, we determined that the school was involuntarily transferring Damon without following the appropriate process. We asked the school to reconsider their decision. When they refused to, we advised Damon and his family that they had the right to request a hearing to challenge the involuntary transfer and offered them attorney referrals. As mentioned in our 2015 annual report, we more than doubled our outreach events in school year 14 through 15, and this year we have met with and presented before organizations such as the Latin American Youth Center and Healthy Families, Thriving Communities Collaboratives. I have participated on education panels, such as the bullying panel hosted by the Washington Bar Association and the special education panel hosted by the Ward 8 State Board member and the Office of the Student Advocate. I also moderated a panel on parent engagement for the DC STEM Network, and we continue to broaden our reach because we believe it's important to engage in by using a multi-pronged approach to helping our DC students and families. As we have engaged in outreach, we've had to take a critical look at how parents can access our services. We identified a need for outreach materials that were more parent-friendly and translated into multiple languages. As a result, we have developed more parent-friendly brochures and had a limited number, based on our budget, translated into English. We revised our website to provide our core message and information in Spanish, and included a Spanish voicemail message on our intake line. We also met recently with the Mayor's Office of Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs to discuss our services and the way that we can better engage constituents that we have not reached out to in the past. However, we need the resources to fully meet the mandates of the Language Access Act and provide our materials and services in multiple languages. There is a clear demand. A number of schools and community organizations that have asked our office for outreach materials in languages other than English. Moreover, this school year, we also shared our materials with DC Public Libraries and 10 of the most highly visited DC recreation centers in our effort to ensure that every family with children attending DC public schools is aware of and can access our services. This school year, I have also spent some time meeting new DCPS principals to discuss the role of the Ombudsman and to create an opportunity to listen to issues that are important to them. It is my hope to continue to develop relationships at the school level so we can serve as a resource to schools as well as to families and students. Furthermore, in order to fulfill our statutory mandate to identify and raise systemic issues within the education sectors, we believe it is important to share these issues not just from the parent perspective, but also informed by other stakeholders, such as principals and school staff members. We realize that our families often come to various DC government agencies with a diverse set of needs, and thus they would benefit from cross-agency collaboration in the effort to meet their needs. As a result, we are in the process of further deepening those relationships with DC government partners. This year, we have started to develop relationships with the CFSA Ombudsman and the DBH, Department of Behavioral Health Ombudsman. We have also been invited to serve as a member of the DBH Ombudsman Advisory Council, designed to advise the Ombudsman on program design and quality. We believe that it is our role to engage in policy work from the perspective of, one, advocating for change in existing LEA policies, that pose barriers to student achievement, and two, ensuring that there is fairness of process on the application of existing policies that are reasonable but may not be uniformly applied across a system. We continue to have quarterly meetings with DCPS leadership to discuss systemic concerns that arise from our casework. Two particular concerns we have raised with DCPS recently are, one, our ongoing concern regarding parent waivers for long-term suspensions, and two, our concern regarding a DCPS high school stating that they were not authorized to amend a student's IEP to include more than 20 hours of specialized instruction, regardless of the student's needs. In the second case, we were able to obtain confirmation from the DCPS central office that IEPs should be developed by the IEP team based on the student's needs, and that the school level staff was mistaken in their earlier assertion to the family. Finally, I continue to serve as a member of the citywide truancy task force, as well as part of a policy work group with GW University Law School and other education partners to address revisions or encourage revisions to Chapter 25 of the DC Municipal Regulations, which is DCPS's disciplinary policy. In conclusion, I appreciate the opportunity to testify today and look forward to working collaboratively with the council, city agencies, local organizations, and families to improve the quality of education in DC. If parents, families, and students have concerns or complaints about any education-related issue, they can reach out to our office by calling 202-741-0886, emailing us at ombudsman@dc.gov, or visiting the State Board of Education website. Thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony. Ms. Gibson-Hubbard, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Grosso and staff. My name is Faith Gibson-Hubbard, and I am the Chief Student Advocate, and I have the pleasure of leading the Office of the Student Advocate, which is located in the DC State Board of Education. The Office of the Student Advocate was officially established in May of 2015, and I'm really pleased to join you today to testify about the work of our office. The Student and Parent Empowerment Act of 2013 established the Office of the Student Advocate to represent students and parents on issues regarding public education in the District of Columbia. The legislative vision set for our office was the foundation upon which to begin the work of our office. But over the last 9.5 months, I have worked diligently to make our legislative mandate actually operational. This work has been quite entrepreneurial. And has created a lot of opportunity to really meet with the various stakeholders that our office was created to serve. This office is very unique and innovative and vital in nature, but an office such as ours within a government structure does not exist in any form anywhere else. So getting this office up to be operational, as I stated before, required many months of meetings, well over 100, either in community settings or individuals and parents and students, numerous brainstorming sessions, and significant coalition building. The mission of the Office of the Student Advocate is to support and empower DC residents to achieve equal access to public education through advocacy, outreach, and information services. In our work, we provide step-by-step assistance for students, parents, families, and community members to be informed, be connected, and be empowered. We guide and support students, parents, and families, as well as community members in navigating the public education system in the District of Columbia. Our role is an essential one because, as we know, despite the best of intentions, the public education landscape in our fair city is extremely complex, and the very uniqueness of our public education system is both an opportunity and a barrier. This work requires a multi-pronged approach to ensure that community members' voices are heard throughout the District of Columbia, and our work takes place in 5 different ways. First, by providing individual coaching to students, parents, and community members who request our services, leadership training and workshops for students and families, resource development, coalition building within government, community organizations, and civic organizations, and policy advocacy through coalitions and task forces. Since my appointment to this role in May of 2015, I have worked in the capacity that has uncovered both the wonderful opportunities and services for students and their families to access, as well as the challenges and hurdles that families face in our public education system. To that end, our office has guided, supported, and empowered over 100 families and students in a way that gives them the ability to achieve equal access to public education through if they need advocacy assistance or being connected to resources that are available to them. The bulk of this work has included coaching, connecting families to relevant stakeholders, and in some cases actually acting as a voice for a parent through direct interventions. For example, one parent who had a difficulty obtaining an IEP for their child for several months reached out to our office for assistance. We advised this particular parent of their rights regarding special education and coached them through effective communication with their school to ensure that their needs could be heard. As a result, after an entire year of not being heard, the school finally agreed to conduct the evaluation, and the teacher of that child later requested that the mom, who had previously been successful in getting her needs heard, support other parents in advocating for their rights for their child. In another instance, we worked with a family who was very hesitant about obtaining a 504 plan for their child, who had very severe food allergies. But we supported the school in implementing, But through our work with them, they were able to speak with their school about actually working through the 504 plan. And they also were able to work with the school in implementing a whole school strategy around food safety plans. So therefore, this wasn't just for their child, but those benefits extended school-wide. This individual level work is possible only through really being able to hear from people who need our services. And we do operate a public education hotline, which accepts requests for assistance from students, parents, community members who have questions, and we provide them with information that they need in regards to public education and refer them to individuals who can really assist them with those needs, because we know that it's not about our office alone, but we want to make sure to connect families to the multiple resources that are available to them within the city. Requests for assistance can also be submitted online, so people don't all have to call, but they can do that through the State Board website. This mechanism also allows us to provide this one-on-one coaching that families need and those connections that they also need. Our work with students and parents allows us to connect our requests for assistance that we are seeing from our office in ways that can help to tackle systemic issues and remove barriers for students and their families. Empowering students, parents, and families to be their own best advocates is the primary focus of our office. To further support this leadership of students and parents, our office has developed a variety of trainings, information sessions, and workshops to help empower families. For instance, our office is currently in the planning stages of implementing our Volunteer Advocate Program, which will be a 7-week training program for any education stakeholder that can equip them to be education advocates within their own school communities. This program is still in the preliminary phases, and we are excited about the partnerships that we are forging for that. Our office has also worked to develop in-person information sessions and workshops on special education issues and advocacy. This discussion is only made possible through intergovernmental and community-based organization collaboration. The first panel discussion was a Know Your Rights special education discussion that included panelists from the Children's Law Center, Advocates for Justice and Education, the Office of the Ombudsman for Public Education, Family Voices of DC, and Special Education Parent Advocates. The first panel took place in Ward 8, and it was a really great discussion. The second discussion will take place on March 10th in partnership with the Ward 4 Education Alliance at West Education Campus. and we're looking forward to that. In addition to the trainings and workshops, we have also developed online materials that are accessible anytime. One of the primary functions outlined in the legislative mandate of our office was the creation of public education resource centers to advise parents and students on all matters regarding public education. Meeting this mandate and statutory requirement is nearly impossible with the current staffing of our office. In an effort to attempt to fill this void and meet the statutory requirements, the Education and Community Resource Guide was developed and launched by our office. I'm particularly proud of this online resource because it can be found directly on the State Board website and really connects families, students, or any community member to more than 350 resources in 30 different category areas that either impact or have some type of connection to education. And it's focused on all 8 wards, so people can find resources that will be directly useful to them. We have also developed several resource tip sheets on various different topics to support students and families in all aspects of education and achievement. A wide variety of resources can be found on our webpage. The resources on our webpage include effective communication skills for interacting with your child's school, fostering effective working relationships with your child's school and teacher, managing conflict through effective communication, a Know Your Rights special education and advocacy slide presentation, a slide presentation on understanding the differences between 504 plans and IEPs, also a tip sheet on questions to ask for parent and teacher conferences, and lastly, a governance structure map about the District of Columbia public education system. Finally, we are working to continue to translate our materials into multiple languages because there are definitely have been requests for that, and not having this ability to do so due to some financial constraints is extremely problematic because we know that we're missing particular communities. Coalition building and partnerships are vitally important, and we've only been able to do our work through those different relationships. And this has been a positive force in really continuing to further have outreach about our office to a variety of different communities and really be able to meet the different needs of families. Our partnerships also enable us to really reach those families and support them, especially since we can't translate and different things of that nature. One example is our partnership with My School DC and other like organizations, which has allowed us to assist families in the school enrollment process for students who are eligible for enrollment in public schools in the District of Columbia. We were able to be a part of this process and provide families with information about not only the school lottery application itself, but also with appropriate school fit for families and their children. We are really thankful for the relationships that we've built because we've been able to get referrals to our office from DCPS educators themselves, the Chancellor's Office, instructional superintendents, definitely from council members and State Board of Education members, as well as the DC Public Charter School Board and other community-based organizations. We've also been able to reach out to DCPS principals as well as charter LEAs, and we've also been able to distribute our brochures, which are in English, to high traffic areas such as public libraries and schools, and are working to also have those at recreation centers. We are thankful for the partnerships that have been able to be forged with other DC government offices, such as the Mayor's Office of Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs, African Affairs, Latino Affairs, and also the Office of Human Rights, as well as similarly focused community-based organizations. I also want to highlight some of the parent development work that we're doing. We are currently working with the Ward 7 Education Council as well as the Ward 7 State Board of Education representative to do a series of parent development and leadership series meetings in Ward 7. This will help not only increase the number of parent organizations that are within Ward 7, but also help them to build capacity within and also create tools for them that will help them to thrive and continue to have longevity while also leveraging parent power. In addition to that partnership, we are also working with the Ward 5 Council on Education to create a Parent Advisory and Leadership Council in Ward 5. This great work has really allowed me to also be a part of different policy conversations, but that will be in my written testimony because I'll be moving on to my conclusion. My work within the office has only just begun, and I'm excited about the work ahead. Whether it's individual, group, or coalition wide support discussions, my office's aim is to enable students, parents, and families to become effective advocates for themselves in such a way that will thus impact their individual communities. Our ability to continue to work with the current and do the current work that we do, as well as to fulfill our legislative mandate of our office moving forward, will be challenging without sufficient financial or appropriate staffing. Currently, our office is only staffed with one FTE, that would be myself, one half-time program assistant that I share with the Office of the Ombudsman, and a fellow. This staffing model, in addition to the funding, does not appropriately support the work that we are required to do statutorily. The services of our office are absolutely vital, and we are excited about the innovative and collaborative ideas that we have. We look forward to serving the broader community in a way that will help them to be informed, connected, and empowered. I appreciate this opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to continuing to work collaboratively with the council, community-based organizations, and especially our students and families, in not only a way that will move forward our work, but will really help to amplify their voices within the community and in the public education space. I would be remiss if I did not share the information for our office. So if students, parents, or families, or anyone is interested in contacting our office, they can do so by calling us at 202-741-4692 or by emailing us at student.advocate@dc.gov, or you can also visit our webpage on the State Board of Education website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank all three of you for your commitment to education and the work that you do every day in the city to try to make it better, which I appreciate. I have some follow-up questions. Like I said before, I'm not going to repeat a lot of the questions that we already asked in writing and that you answered in writing. Those will be available for people if they want to read them, and they're also on our websites. But I do want to go over a few of the State Board's activities over the past year, if nothing else, just to highlight the work that you've been able to accomplish. I think it's probably the most productive year in the history of the State Board of Education, and that's impressive. And one of the things you did that's not as publicly known that I think you deserve a lot of credit for is the tracking of what's happening with the Every Student Succeeds Act, also the waiver conversation around the ESEA, which is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. You guys have done a lot of work behind the scenes on this. I just want to ask a few questions about that. So what happens next now that the new law is passed? What happens with the ESEA waiver, and where do we go from there?
Thank you so much for the question and for your comments. This was an incredibly productive year, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the work that our staff has done. Our staff assistant, Jamika Briscoe-Kendrick, is here, and Sean Chalk, our policy analyst. They've just been wonderful in working with board members and with our executive director, John Paul Hayworth, so I want to acknowledge that. In terms of ESSA and ESEA, we've been incredibly involved in this process. Staff has been analyzing the law for the past couple of months, working in particular with NASB, the National Association of State Boards of Education, to figure out what we need to do. We had a great conversation with the executive director of NASB on Sunday at our annual retreat, and this is the largest devolution of power from the federal government to state and local jurisdictions, I think, since the federal government established the Department of Education. That means we've got a lot of work to do, and we understand that the clock is ticking. Our current waiver is in effect until August. I think
of this year?
Of this year.
August 2016.
Yes. I think pretty much everything will stay in effect for the 16-17 school year as well, though, because we don't want to make a change and then make another change for the 17-18 school year is when we have to have our new state accountability plan in effect. So what we've done, I've had conversations with the superintendent of education and with the deputy mayor on figuring out a timeline. Just last week, we sent over a draft timeline of the activities that the state board needs to engage in on our side of things to get meaningful public engagement on the issues. One interesting fact is that jurisdictions are going to have to choose, and schools are going to have at least one form of non-academic measure of school success. That means we're finally moving away from just test scores to what else schools are doing right and what else students can do to be successful. We're very excited about exploring that. We have to have at least one. We may have more than one.
Right.
And I think in order to make sure that there's time for mayoral review, OAG approval, and 120 days of Department of Education review before this goes into effect for the 17-18 school year, we pretty much need to have all of our work done by next January or February from our side of things. Then it still has a bit more process to go through.
Thank you for that. That's exactly what we needed on the record. If you could submit to the committee those timelines as well, draft as they are, just so we can stay on top of it.
Understanding they are draft, and the Department of Education is still working on guidance.
Well, we just want to make sure that we're in the loop on the timing on all these
Absolutely.
things. And also, the portions of any of this that needs to be done through statutory changes at the council, just let us know ahead of time, because obviously that has a rollout period as well.
Sure.
Don't forget to factor in the ridiculous reality that the Congress has to review our laws, and so there's a 30-day when they're in session period.
Yeah.
So just remember that. I also want to note that you issued a report on challenges associated with implementation of the District of Columbia's new compulsory attendance laws and recommendations for addressing them. And it, I believe, approved the state diploma, which is pretty impressive for individuals who pass the general education exam or complete the National External Diploma Program. It also created the High School Credit Flexibility Task Force that drafted a set of recommendations for allowing schools flexibility to award credit in a variety of ways. And it also oversaw a review of the District of Columbia's health education standards and worked with OSSI to draft these new standards. I'm just pointing these out because I believe that these are major accomplishments, and that you are more engaged this year. I've been doing these hearings for a few years now in policy recommendations and policy change than you have been in the past. And so my question to you is pretty straightforward. I asked this, I think, the first year I did these, and I asked it the second year and the third year. So how'd you do that? I mean, all these years you've been asking for the power to make policy recommendations and changes. So I'm just curious, can you walk me through kind of what's changed? How are you able to engage in these discussions? I know that there's been changes at OSSI. I know there's been changes, but I just want to just hear a little bit about that evolution of the board's ability to engage in policy discussions.
Well, thank you for the question. And I'm just going to throw in there that we didn't have an executive director for a good portion of the year, and we didn't have a policy analyst for a good portion of the year as well.
So watch out.
Yeah, we've gone through some staff changes, and the board has changed. We've got a new board this year that is incredibly energetic, incredibly knowledgeable, and incredibly interested in moving and increasing the pace of education reform in the district, so we leave no students, I don't want to say leave no child behind, but we are allowing more students to succeed and bringing them up at a quicker pace. It's taken a lot of hard work, frankly. Board members have taken on a lot of policy work themselves. Laura Wilson-Phelan, who ran the Credit Flexibility Task Force, surmises that she spent 85% of the work that was done by the task force was her working nights and weekends. That's time away from her twins. Right. It's a lot of work. We are doing everything we can to keep up with the mayor's initiatives that she sends to us and that her team send to us. It's tough, but we're committed to this. We're public servants, and we're going to get it done.
So can you give me an update then, a little bit more in depth on your relationship with OSSI now and how that's going on the record? It was a challenge that we made last year in the hearings to try to improve on that. I think it's a good story there, but can you just walk me through it a little bit, how you've worked together?
It's all about building trust, and you do that through frank communication. This year, the superintendent and I and our leadership team, and she and her leadership team, we have a monthly meeting where we sit down together for an hour and talk about what we've done, what we're doing, and what we need to do. We are comparing calendars, we're comparing priorities. Even when we disagree, we're having a conversation that is open and honest with each other about what our priorities are and what, from the state board side, what we're hearing from our constituents. It's been incredibly helpful to have those meetings. And I have to say, I've been impressed with Hansel Kang, our superintendent's respect of the role that the board plays in the policymaking process. I think past superintendents have not shown that same level of mutual respect.
Great. So, is there anything that the board had hoped to achieve last year that it was unable to achieve?
We still got a couple of things on our plate. We want to update graduation requirements. The board's done a lot of work on this, given the fact that we didn't have as productive a working relationship with the previous superintendent. We weren't able to get that over the finish line. The superintendent now has committed to working with us to update those graduation requirements. I think that goes along well with the new work that we've done on credit flexibility. The health education standards, we've taken way too long to get this done, but it helps to have a health and wellness deputy superintendent, Dawn Anthony, who's engaged and committed to this. We have a lot of conversations, and she works really closely with our staff to make sure that we get this done. We hope to vote in April, but these new health education standards will be in place by the 16-17 school year. And
is there anything that if you just had more money you might be able to get done?
Yes. I think that we as a board want to be more engaged with our communities. There are ANCs across the city that we frankly don't get to as often as we need to. There are LSATs and PTAs all across the city. As individual board members, we don't have the capacity to do all of the policy work and the public engagement and the constituent services that we're doing. We need a little help. I think the board is very interested in improving our communications, meaning being more policy leaders through article writing, through speaking engagements, those types of things. And frankly, if one of the things that I think Ruth Wattenberg, for instance, from Ward 3 would like to do is more reports. What are we seeing? What can we focus on that perhaps DCPS or the charters or the deputy mayor isn't? And how can we, facilities are a big issue, you know that. I think Joe Whedon from Ward 6 would be really interested in us doing work collaboratively on how we can improve modernization of facilities mostly across DCPS, but charter schools need to be updated and modernized too.
Right.
So.
Okay. And you mentioned it in your testimony, and I think it's important to go back over it a little bit, is the engagement on language access and the possibility for the proper expansive translations that need to happen. Tell me again, just let's go over a little bit, how are you managing this? There is a mandate. We are working on an update to that law in the council. We've already updated it in our committee. It's going through a couple other committees. And I'm hoping that more money will come with that, and that's the idea behind the bill. So, you know, how often do you get, as a state board, information out in other languages other than English? What happens when you go to a meeting or you have a meeting and there needs to be a translator present? Right now at the council, we pay for one to be here for hearings, for example, when it's asked in advance. What do you guys do in order to make that possible so we can really serve all of the populations of our city?
Sure, and I'm going to ask Ms. Smith and Ms. Gibson-Hubbard to weigh in if you have additional comments, but we're not meeting our mandate. I'm just going to be quite honest there. We have updated portions of the State Board's website into additional languages. We don't have the resources to be fully compliant. I think for the first part of the year, we used Aussie's telephone language service. We have now taken that back, so that's coming out of our budget. We are working on making sure that that continues to be available with the funds that we have, limited funds that we have. And we want to be compliant, particularly Ward 1, for instance, has a lot of non-English speaking families. I think Ms. Wilson-Phelan would be very interested in having more materials available about the work that the board does and the issues we're working on available to her constituents.
So you don't have the telephone line access anymore through OSSI? You're doing it now, you took it in-house?
Correct.
And is that part of your budget? You built that in? I don't know what that costs. I'm just...
Yeah, we're not building in anything, we're taking other things out.
Okay.
You heard the stress on fellows. If we add in something, we have to take something out. It is a zero-sum game when you're dealing with a budget at an agency, and so I think we've got fewer fellows than we've had in the past, and that's one of the symptoms of not having discretionary funds available to meet our mandates.
Right, right. Did you guys want to add anything to that, Ms. Smith?
Yeah.
I would, go ahead.
Oh, I'm happy to. As a part of my written testimony, I submitted an opportunity that I had to go with the Associate Ombudsman to Carlos Rosario to speak with parents, because although they are adult students, they are parents of children who are within our public schools. And it was a really great experience for us because simultaneously we were able to have translated to these families services that we could provide to them, answer questions immediately. And I actually walked away from that feeling very emotional because thinking that we are missing so many families within the city who deserve to have services or have access to different things. And so that was a great opportunity, and they've since invited us back. But that's just one small portion.
Right.
I have been able to translate my brochures into Spanish, but printing them is still a challenge. So they may be available electronically, but then there are so many other languages as well. The language line is great. If you're in a pinch and a family comes in and you need a translator immediately. But I think over time, when you continue to work with families and you're trying to build relationship with them, it's really hard to do that when you're doing it through someone who's on the phone, and it's a bit of a delay. Some schools have been really great when I've had to go to meetings there where they have people who are translating, and that's great, but we are absolutely missing whole subsections of our communities that deserve attention and the services of all of our offices, and we can't do that the way that we are currently funded. And I know that we try to also develop other community-based organization relationships, and that has been helpful because if they have those inroads into communities, they can make those connections, but we still have to take it to the next step, and we don't have the funds to be able to do so.
Ms. Smith?
And I'd like to add to that, I think, so a month ago, I was invited to speak to some families by a community organization, and they rescinded the invitation because I didn't speak Spanish and I didn't have access to a Spanish interpreter. And so, you know, that is a frustrating experience to have. And I think the other thing is that there are times where different communities feel as though we actually don't care about them because we don't have materials translated and we don't have access, we can't provide access to our services in the way that they deserve.
Have any of y'all done any fiscal analysis of what this would cost to get it to the level you want to do it at, Ms. Smith?
So we don't have a number available, but we have met with a vendor about providing those services, and I'm sure we could provide a proposal around that.
Yeah,
it'd be good to know actual costs. We're working this out agency by agency, but it's important. It's a huge priority of mine. It's why I revisited the law, and I think, you know, we aren't a complete city unless we're serving everybody that lives in our city, and that includes a whole lot of people that don't speak English as their first language. And it's one thing to say that we're going to, you know, be progressive and a great place to live, but if we don't really open the government up in the best way possible to everybody, that means the basics like speaking their language, we're not doing it right.
To just, oh, I'm sorry.
President.
When you're doing that, make sure that we have the premier deaf and hard of hearing university in the country. Make sure that our deaf and hard of hearing residents are included in that.
Well, also we've included visually impaired too, because access to the internet is a matter of just making sure you have the right website backing so that you can have it read to you over the speakers. Did you want to add something else on that?
Yes, so I did inquire with the vendor just what it would cost to translate our brochure,
Right.
the brochure from my office. And for all of the languages, it was about $2,000, but that
Right.
doesn't include printing. And that also doesn't include the online education and community resource guide that my office has. That doesn't include the other tip sheets that would be available to families.
Right.
That doesn't include emails that we need to go back and forth to families. So I think if $2,000 is just for the translation of just the words in the brochure, that's not the design, the printing of those. But I think if you scale that up to all the other resources that we want to provide to families, the brochure is just one very small piece.
Well, let's think about that more and more as we move forward. I'm going to be moving this. Hopefully, this bill will move forward. I hear that the Judiciary Committee is moving on it, and then it's got to go to the Committee of the Whole. And then what will happen is there'll be more of these language access services built into school by school. So you guys probably can piggyback then on that a little bit when you go there, because we're going to provide these direct services to the students through the schools. So I think, anyway, we'll keep working on this. I just want to switch over to office space. As you know, last summer I came out and toured the space at 441 4th Street, and I'm just wondering, have you guys moved into the new space yet?
We have not, but we've made progress.
Okay.
Yeah, we are on the verge. I just toured. So as you know, to give anyone who's watching who's not as familiar with this, we've outgrown the space on the 7th floor at 441 with the addition of the Ombudsman and the Chief Student Advocate and their staff and fellows in particular. What we've done is worked with the Deputy Mayor and worked with DGS. They found additional square footage for us on the 5th floor of 441. Our Vice President, Karen Williams from Ward 7, and our Executive Director and I toured that new space 2 weeks ago. And it's nearing completion. We expect to have control of that space by the end of March, which is terrific. And I want to thank the Deputy Mayor for her advocacy and this committee for its advocacy on our behalf.
So April 1st, you're moving in there?
Well, let's hope it's not a joke.
Okay, April 1st. I'll count on that. So you're going to keep both spaces?
Yes, and the current space on the 7th floor was recarpeted and repainted, although there are still a couple of additional touch-ups we'd like to do there. But it's much more friendly right now.
Yeah, when I went there last time, it wasn't very nice.
Yeah.
I also will note that, are you going to be able to pay for all this? I mean, what happens? You haven't paid rent, I think, previously, or are you paying rent? And if you keep both these, how are you building that in? And, I got to ask. What's happening there?
We're working with the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor's Budget Office to answer those questions. We don't have an answer at this time. The construction cost was paid to we were able to
save it from before.
Work the construction costs by using money that we'd paid to DGS 2 years ago that they credited us to pay for the renovations of the 5th floor.
All right, well, we need to stay on that, because as we go forward, we wouldn't want you to be evicted from your space because you didn't pay your rent.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions specifically for the Ombudsman. So I know that we have talked a little bit about the annual report that you have to submit to the board, and I'm wondering if you could give just a brief summary of the top points from that report that you submitted last year, and make any kind of recommendations that the council might have to act on regarding your report.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Grasso. So we make annual recommendations every year in September, 90 days after the conclusion of the school year. This past year, in 2015, we made some recommendations around various areas. The first in school discipline. So one of the recommendations we made was that DCPS should minimize the use of the emergency exception under Chapter 25, and we are actually currently doing some work with a work group around Chapter 25 and revisions around that. If we look at special education, one of the areas that we have heard from families about or around is when parents make oral requests for evaluation, the schools must treat those requests as formal requests that trigger the evaluation timeline. We had a number of families that would come to us still come to us, unfortunately, and say, I've spoken to the school repeatedly and asked that they, begin to evaluate my child, and nothing's happened. I've had those conversations in August and September at the start of the school year. It is now May or June at the conclusion of the school year, and nothing's happened. So we did make recommendations around that. We also made recommendations around bullying, that schools should document and investigate all allegations of bullying. There are a number of parents who came to us in 2015, but as well as this year, who have said, I've spoken to a dean of students, a teacher, and other school staff. I believe my child is actually being bullied, but the school hasn't done anything about it. And they also haven't articulated what the process is. And so we've worked not only with schools, but actually very closely with the Office of Human Rights, their bullying prevention program, Suzanne Greenfield, to really address some of those allegations, but also to provide support to schools around what are the requirements under the law and how can we ensure that they meet the needs of their students. Those are some of the areas that we kind of mentioned in our annual report. What we have really been focusing on this year is sort of how do we move from just making recommendations to actually seeing some of these recommendations being implemented. I can't tell you that we have the answer to that, but certainly by participating in policy work groups, by participating on the truancy task force, we do believe that we are able to provide our input and really talk about things from the student's perspective and from using the parent voice. But we, look forward to working with other DC government agencies and DCPS as well as public charter schools to try to address some of those recommendations.
Well, just so you know, this committee also takes those seriously, and fairly often I think we take what you've learned out there as information and backing for what we're trying to do here at the council as well. So you should always look at it as an opportunity to push policy change here. Right. Are there any other issues with the annual report? There are. I know it's required by statute that you do this report, and if you're going to need changes to the statute, you should put that on the record here. Now that you've done it a couple years, there might be, I know we've talked about the timing of when the report should be due or not due, and how that's not perfectly lined up with your work workload, and so maybe you can just talk about that. And I think the chief student advocate also has a report due according to the statute, maybe around the same timing. So maybe you guys could just tell me if there needs to be adjusted.
Yes, thank you for the question. So we have made a number of revisions that we'd like to see, or proposed revisions. One of the revisions that I mentioned to you not too long ago was currently our statute says that we have to submit an annual report to the state board 90 days after the conclusion of the school year. That is really problematic. We've really tried hard and we've met the deadline for the last 2 years, but that puts us typically in mid-September of the school year, which is when we're getting a lot of calls from families around enrollment and other issues, and so we're struggling to both finish writing the annual report and then also help families. And our priority is really always families and always students. And so that's been a struggle for us. Do you want to jump in about your?
Yes,
You're
so
going to do
I will.
a report this year?
Yes, I am. And it is also supposed to be 90 days after
That's what I thought.
the school year.
You could do it earlier, right? You don't have to wait until September to do it. You could do it 60 days.
One could. It would
Yeah,
be
it's
very
not
challenging.
prohibited.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
that's not prohibited. Would you prefer it to be 120 days? 140 days? 130 days?
I definitely trust my colleagues' experience.
What do you think?
And as I'm going through it now, I think 120 days would actually be quite useful, because then you're already kind of moving into the new school year. So you would have wrapped up things. You've already started your kickoff. Hopefully you would have had that as more of a well-oiled machine,
Okay.
I think.
Well,
as
give
things
me
are, so.
give me some draft language on this if you can before the Budget Support Act goes through, and we'll see if we can't fix it.
You will have it today.
And if there's other stuff as well. Just a second. Okay. All right, I'll get to that in just a second. I have one last question for the Ombudsman and Chief Student Advocate, and this one is a little bit more philosophical, so to speak, but not really. The question I have is, the problem here is money, 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 money. You don't have enough resources. What you're doing every day takes a lot of money and a lot of time. And the challenge I have is that now when I look for money, I have to give it to, you know, some to the board, some to the student advocate, and some to the ombudsman. And I feel like there may be a chance that the council has gotten in front of itself, and maybe the mayor and folks, in actually creating too many offices. And I'm wondering if you guys can just go through what's the difference in your mind between what you guys do. And the reason I say that is because it's a lot easier for me to fund one office that's doing the same work with all the support underneath it and all the effort that it needs to really back it up. It seems like I'm doing two things. I'm doing, you know, language access translations for two places. I'm doing more fellow work, more, you know, phone lines, more websites, more all this stuff, double the effort. So I don't know if you have an answer to this. I'm not necessarily wanting to put you on the spot here, but I do want an answer before the budget hearing on what is the difference between what you guys do. Because when I hear your testimony and I listen to it closely, it doesn't sound any different to me. And that's just me speaking as a lay person who doesn't do this every single day. I know you're out there, you know, doing amazing work in your own rights, but I think that there is some potential that we can actually leverage the work each of you are doing in one office rather than how it is now, which is two offices. And you guys work together really well, so put your heads together and think about this. And you can comment if you want to on it now on the record, but I'm not asking you to. I'm just putting that out there that it is going to be a lot easier for this government to support and sustain real advocacy for families and students through an ombudsman or whatever office we call it if we are really focusing on one entity and not two. And I was on the council when we created the Student Advocate's Office, and so I'm telling you that we all learn as we move forward, and we have to be fairly nimble in order to budget these things right. So think about it. If you want to mention anything, you can. I'm not putting you on the spot. Just say you don't want to if you don't want to now.
I'll attempt to respond. So what I will say is that as an education ombudsman, I think we do have a unique role, both within the DC education landscape, but also within the United States. There are very few of them. And one of the things that we've seen is that that families really didn't have a place to go in the past. And, you know, one thing that we've really worked really hard at is not only do they have a place to go, but we really want to see, and we have seen in a lot of our cases, meaningful change. And, you know, when I've had, and I've talked about this before, when I receive a picture of a child who's now graduated because we assisted them, that is a really important moment for our office and the work that we do. I will say that, you know, and I can't tease all of it out, but certainly when we look at budget, a lot of it, when we talk about brochures, yeah, maybe, you know, there's some cost to having a couple offices with different brochures, but largely, I think Faith and I have worked really hard to really work together in a way that makes a difference for our family. So one way is, you know, when a family comes to us and has an enrollment question, if they have a problem, I'm able to assist them. But if they call and say, I just want some schools that will meet my child's needs, they love to play the violin, and they have, you know, really specific needs or desires or interests, then I'm able to send them to the Office of the Student Advocate, and I'm able to move forward on another case for another family. What I will say is, and I can speak from the perspective of our office, is that we often feel like we're drowning, where we just have so many families that are reaching out to us. There's such a need, and we really love the work that we do. But I would say that, yeah, I don't want you to hear money, money, money from me, you know, because I think we've really worked hard to do as much as we could with what we had. But often what I would say, too, is that when I'm speaking of my own office, we're talking about very little money that we could use that would make a difference for us. So having fellows that I could pay maybe another additional amount of money, like $1,000, would make a big difference for them because they wouldn't have to go to graduate school and have 2 jobs, right? And so, you know, in many ways, I'm not talking about $1 million. I might be speaking of $5,000 for fellows or small expenses like that. And so I think what we've tried to do is really figure out, you know, how can we work within the constraints that we have? And then if we were to have additional goals, what would that cost? What we've also found is sort of leveraging, which I think Mrs. Gibson-Hubbard talked about earlier, sort of our relationships with other DC government entities and other community-based organizations.
So here's the deal. I appreciate that, and it makes me understand what you're doing, and I think that's good. But then I heard Ms. Gibson-Hubbard say that you're doing work with kids who are struggling with IEPs and not getting their IEPs set up and everything like that. Well, that's what you said in your testimony too.
But those are also things.
Well, hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so, you know, when we think about the money that we have that's limited in this effort because, you know, we just aren't putting a whole lot of money into it in the budget, then I say to myself, well, are you really coordinating in a way? You know, your statute, Ms. Hubbard, says that you would help students advocate in front of the ombudsman. And, you know, what does that mean? The ombudsman, you don't, you know, do any kind of issue that has to do with challenging the student like that, right? I mean, maybe you would bring a student to the ombudsman and say to the ombudsman, hey, this student really could use your professional help on something, but maybe I've got it all wrong. Go ahead.
Right. Yes, we do work closely together in that way when families need kind of a teamed approach. So we have worked with families who are dealing, I can think of a family that we worked with just last week who was dealing with a special education issue, but they couldn't even get to that because the parent was having a hard time communicating with the school. So I worked with the parent around the communication strategy that she should have with the school, which then led to being able to actually work on the IEP along with the Ombudsman's office and the school on their IEP.
That's good. And I like that work. I think it's important work. But why can't that be done as a staffer in the Ombudsman's office?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I think that I think one of the issues that
which I don't think is like totally exclusive of what you're doing. You guys are working hard together. I'm not saying that's not happening.
Right. We are, and I do think that that's appropriate. I think one of the challenges that I see sometimes in my work is that if both offices would have been rolled out at the same time, some of the things that were coming to the Ombudsman's office probably would have come to the student advocate's office in the first place. So I think one of the challenges is the Ombudsman's office was not only doing their mandate, but also filling a void that families were looking for and just getting answers to their questions, figuring out where to go, and they were doing the best job that they could do and being able to fulfill that void. I think one of the things that Joanna mentioned in her testimony is that, you know, that there are many families that are coming to them with real problems, but there are also families that some of their problems can be resolved through just the type of interactions that they have. Or sometimes there have been problems that the Ombudsman's office is dealing with at a particular school, and then they say, hey, maybe as we're brainstorming together, we're like, I think that's a larger problem because there's not a voice for parents within that school. And so then there becomes an opportunity for my office to work with the school around not only effective communication, but the parent organization pieces and development within different school communities. I think one of the unique things from my office is not to say that this is not resources that the Ombudsman couldn't provide, but some of the resources that are provided in the Education and Community Resource Guide or things that we talk to families about are not complaints. They are truly people trying to figure out, where am I supposed to be going? How is this office supposed to be working on my behalf? And really trying to figure out how to leverage their own abilities to be able to advocate for something or at least get a process started, which would ultimately keep them from having to go to the Ombudsman's office with a complaint.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
I think the other area that is really important is that the Office of the Student Advocate can, in theory, launch advocacy campaigns in the way that I can't. So our office is supposed to be neutral. So while we do work on various policy issues, it is not appropriate for me to jump out and talk about certain issues in the way that an advocate could. And so I do think that The Office of the Student Advocate is really a natural extension of the work that we're doing. So, as we're seeing certain issues, the Office of the Student Advocate could take those issues and work on them, develop coalitions and things that really wouldn't be the appropriate role for the Ombudsman's office.
Okay, this is to be continued. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Now, I just have one more follow-up question for you. I have a few more questions to just get on the record here. These are good questions that Christina's raised that are important. Starting with you, Mr. Jacobson, the high school flexibility that you mentioned in your testimony, that the comment period is currently happening and you're reviewing the changes. So do you think that there is going to be implementation of this high school flexibility credits for school year 16-17? And if so, is that enough time for the LEAs in their transition?
Yes. The public comment period, I believe, closed February 22nd. So we've been working with the superintendent's office to review those. I am going to put a plug in. I think Jack Evans has a bill to allow to make public comments that are received on rules, because technically they're only owned by the agency.
I'm with him on that.
I think we would. I'm going to talk for myself and not behalf of the board, because the board itself doesn't have a position on this yet. But personally, I would really like that to happen. OSSI doesn't have to share their comments with us, and so they give us a summary of the comments, we don't get the actual comments themselves. I personally, Jack Jacobson, think that would be really helpful for us to have when we're really doing deep policy work, and it would be really helpful for our staff to have. So on a larger note, going back to credit flexibility itself, yes, we put this on a fast track, working with the superintendent and speaking with LEAs to make sure that we did our work in a timely fashion so that this could be implemented for the 16-17 school year. I think, is it Goodwill High School is a new public charter school that is hoping to be more standards-based rather than Carnegie unit. So we're still in conversations, but we expect to move at least a portion of this in March.
Okay. Well, if you could just maybe take a minute to have someone come by the office and walk us through that and the timing on that, because we know from experience in the committee that when we make changes that the LEAs have to implement, it takes them a lot of time. Like, we try to get it done January, February timeline in order to get them up and running by the time the school year opens, and it might be valuable to wait a year, but let's have a off-the-record conversation about that soon so that we're all on the same path, okay?
Great, and I'm happy to have an on-the-record conversation too. What we've done is, first of all, schools don't have to implement this.
Okay.
They may implement it.
That's
so
good.
If a school
Right.
chooses to, it can. It isn't required
That's
to.
a good point.
Another great point is that we've tried as a board and as the superintendent, I don't want to speak on behalf of the superintendent, but I believe what we've done is tried to signal to schools that we were moving forward on this so they could start the planning. And
But that you solved the problem by just saying that they may do this. They don't have to do any of this, and that it's just an opportunity for them to do something different. All right. The student advocate, the statute calls for you to have public education resource centers, but the funding's not available. You didn't mention this very much in your testimony, and I'm just wondering what work you have done to engage students around enrollment regarding this. So we have the EdFest, which I went to and is certainly a lot of fun, and it's a bit overwhelming as well. If you went, I mean, there was a lot of schools there and a lot of people, which is great. I love that, but still a bit overwhelming. And I know that some parents actually pay for consultants to help them navigate the schools. I just tell anyone that asks me to make sure you put all 12 schools in there and hope for the best. But there are people that know more about it than I do. So I'm wondering, kind of, does your office stand in the gap there or not? And to what extent can we keep working to make more information available like that?
Right. So the public education resource centers are just not possible. And so
So we might want to make a statutory change there.
Yes, that is one of the statutory changes that I am hoping for. So
can't just hope. You guys send me some stuff.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. So hoping and writing.
Yeah. Great.
So the first thing that I did on behalf of that was to create that online education and community resource guide so that we
Right.
could at least provide some information. When it comes to enrollment of students, that was one of the first meetings that I tackled along with my school DC. I met with them, talked with them about the parent information sessions that they were doing. We have done some joint presentations before where they talk about the lottery process, and then I have the ability to talk about how I can help families in addition to that process, because they are there to run the lottery, not really to talk through with families about school choice options or other things. And so
just the process is not enough. You have to know more.
Right, and I have really formed a partnership to do that. I also participated in some of their parent information sessions.
Oh, right. And so, for example, this year they decided to not do a second round in the lottery. What is that? What are the implications? How do we get the communication out there about that? You know, I think people that actually went and did the lottery probably read it if they read the site, because I know it's on there, but
it was something that wasn't widely understood. Just yesterday evening, I spoke with the daycare about the enrollment process. It was the last day, and some people were feeling very anxious about that. So there have been daycares that have asked to talk about that. My school DC has been really great in saying, this is a family that needs some more assistance. We can't give it to them, and we've really forged that partnership in that way. I hope that in coming years that we'll still be able to continue to do that, and more information will hopefully continue to be available on our website. But people have definitely reached out. So community groups, daycares, which not only my son's daycare, but other daycares are, of course, wondering about the enrollment process, especially at pre-K, which can be very nerve-wracking. Families also have a lot of questions at the transition grades, because they are going from 5th grade into middle school, and that's often trying to figure out what middle school will work. I mean, yes, we know many families select several middle schools, but sometimes those don't work for students. And so it's not only the conversation in the beginning of the year or as the lottery is coming about, but I even have conversations with the families that need to transfer in the middle of the year and what would work best for them as well.
Thank you very much. And lastly, for the Ombudsman, can you expand more on your parent waivers? What is parent waivers? Around long-term extensions? The waivers, the parent waivers for long-term suspensions.
I was just about to say, that's a great idea, parent warriors. Something the Office of the Student Advocate can work on. Yes, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, only because we are meeting with DCPS next week. So I just want to be careful, and then I don't want to speak for the entire work group, but certainly we know that parents are given waivers to waive their right to participate in an administrative hearing.
I see, yes, okay. We've talked about this in the past. And
that's
so,
right.
We don't need to go into it in depth here, but can you talk a little bit about what's the working group, who's discussing this, and that process more than anything?
So, and I'm not the authorized spokesperson for this work group, but I will say this, that we were contacted by GW Law School, which I attended, and this particular dean was trying to have some of his law students work with families in administrative hearings, especially around suspensions. And when he called us and he called other entities, he found he really couldn't do it. So he convened a work group, and there are some community-based organizations that are part of it, to sit and look at Chapter 25 and say, what are the most pressing areas that would require revision? And so, like I said, I don't want to go into a lot of detail just because we are meeting with DCPS, but that was the purpose of the work group.
Were there any government entities on it other than you? Work groups that don't have government entities on it are just the beginning. It's like drafting.
I don't think so. I might have been the only person.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you want to just keep us in the loop as best you can, let people know that we're really interested in making sure that that's fixed as well, and happy to help.
I'd be happy to do so.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. That's going to do it for you guys. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Great job. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. You're doing a great job.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So just so everyone knows, we have, now we're going to move into the Deputy Mayor for Education. I think my staff and I may have mentioned that part probably wouldn't kick off until closer to noon. So what we're going to do is we're going to take like a 10-minute break, 10-minute recess, and then we'll come back at around 10 of noon or so and start calling names off the list. But otherwise, a lot of these folks may not have gotten here yet, so we're just going to wait for about 10 minutes. So we'll come back in a few minutes. Thank you.